Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Meela Mitra, and on behalf of STEM&Space, I welcome you all here today to another exciting session with, uh, with our renowned astropreneur. So today, we are celebrating World Space Week, and for the theme of World Space Week, and let me remind you what is World Space Week. It's a celebration of astronomy that everybody around the world does in the same weeks of October, the first few weeks of October. October 4th is the day when Sputnik was launched, and October 10th was the day that the first space treaty was signed. So based on that, World Space Week is celebrated October 4th to 10th every year. And this year, the theme is Women in Space. And in that context, we have invited Dr. Bidushi Bhattacharya here with us today, and we are very proud to have her here. So I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit more about her. Dr. Bhattacharya is an ex-NASA scientist turned astropreneur with 3 decades experience in spacecraft development and operations. It's a new space startup. Just a minute. Yeah, I'll just be back in a minute. Yeah, sorry about that. She has 3 decades experience in spacecraft development and operations, new space startup, growth, academic administration, and scientific research. She's founder and CEO of AstroHub. For those of you who want to look it up, it's AstroHub, the word astrohub.co. It's a Singapore and US based startup dedicated to space workforce development for professionals through hands-on training using CubeSats and International Space Station research labs. Her previous experience includes over 2 decades with NASA as a scientist and engineer. She has analyzed and synthesized technical information and played a key role in fostering communication between academic and industrial teams with varying priorities and work cultures, both within NASA, the US, and overseas. Her NASA projects have included the Hubble Space Telescope, the Mars Rover Program, the Galileo Mission to Jupiter, the European Space Agency's Herschel Space Observatory, and others. So with that, I welcome Dr. Bhattacharya here with us here today. And now that space industry privatization is an important point in Indian space industry as well. So we are really looking forward to hearing you. And please go ahead and share your thoughts with our students.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me. And I want to say hello to the audience. It's Saturday morning. You could be relaxing, instead you're watching this. So I would say that you share our love of astronomy and space. So I'm very glad to have you here. What I want to do today is think about your futures. Now, by the time you reach the peak of your professional careers, space is going to be a very commonplace industry. The commercial space sector is growing very quickly. And let me just give you a sense today of what's going on and why we are at this critical point at this time, and why it's such a good idea for you to be studying space-related engineering and science at this very moment. So let me start by sharing my screen here. All right. I have the chat window open, so if you can see this and hear me, just, we all good? Thumbs up? Okay. So first thing I want to do here, since you are already interested in space, can I ask, have you ever wanted to be an astronaut? Yes, I would like to see the world from high above. Or no, I prefer to have my feet solidly grounded on planet Earth. I'm just curious. Give me your answer, yes or no. My chat's taking just a minute to come up, so
I
just
think that
bear with me.
we had deactivated the chat for the beginning part of the session so students could listen. So I have requested Arjun to activate it now.
Yeah, I'm doing
it. Right.
Yes.
Okay, so students, now the chat is activated, so go ahead and answer Dr. Bhattacharya's question as you see it on the presentation.
Yes, Adit says yes. The students are also answering.
Yeah. So you'll have to refresh your chat, your YouTube link.
You know what, let's keep going. I think once the chat window, at least on my side, the chat seems currently to be disabled. So I'll have to do a reload of the page. So let's just keep going for the moment. I'm going to say typically when I speak to students who are interested in space, most of them talk about how they would like to see the world above. The people who usually say, no, I prefer to have my feet solidly planted on planet Earth, tend to be the older people, right? As you might imagine. So young people in general are very interested and very excited about space. So the basic idea here, as I said earlier, is to talk about the future of space tech and what your role will be in this future. So last week, if you follow the news, you know that they took a movie star, a television star, to space. If any of you have watched Star Trek, I know most of you are too young for this, but this was a television show that was very popular with those of us who were in the 70s and the 80s. We were watching this as school students or university students. And this guy here, William Shatner, was the captain of this here spacecraft. And here he is right here. He's now 90 years old and he went to space a few days ago. So we see people of all ages now going to space. These are space tourists who pay hundreds of thousands of US dollars, incredible amounts of money to go, but the price is going to go down. So when we talk about the motivation for sending these guys to space, why did Jeff Bezos choose to fly Captain Kirk? To prove that 90-year-olds love adventure, to study the physical and psychological effects of microgravity on elders, or Blue Origin just wants to sell more tickets. My take on this is, now that we're in a commercial realm, the main idea was that they want to sell more tickets. So if they send up one of these television stars who is a cornerstone of the space sector and inspired our imaginations, that more people will buy tickets. So what are my goals for this lecture? If I do my job properly, by the end of my lecture today, you will understand about the rapidly growing commercial space sector, which is commonly known as NewSpace. You will learn about the unique vantage points and benefits of outer space itself, and understand that there are technical and non-technical opportunities in the sector. And you will understand that rocket science is not mysterious, that it is not inaccessible, and you will understand why NewSpace needs you. And this is the reason I agreed to give this talk today, because I really do think that you guys out there, you are really the key to making this sector happen. So there are clear direct benefits to the space sector today. And the best example of that is your mobile phone. So if you use any kind of phone app, you are looking at location services. When your phone needs to determine your location, What it's actually doing is communicating with satellites in outer space. Your phone has to find 3 satellites to be able to triangulate its position at any time that you need to know your location. And depending on how heavy you are of a user, your cell phone will be communicating with satellites hundreds, if not thousands of times a day. So imagine your life without mobile technology. If your mobile phone, your cell phone did not work, you'd feel pretty disconnected and it'd be very difficult to do a lot of things. So you are already very dependent. Your family is very dependent on mobile phones. So we are all already dependent on outer space. Another example that I like to give is this golden material here. This is a substance known as Mylar. Now, this is a material that on this particular image is being used on a spacecraft to help manage temperature differences, because in space it can be very hot or it can be very cold. And if you apply this thermal material, this Mylar, that helps to manage the change and make it less dramatic, less drastic. So this material, somebody who was not a scientist, who was not an engineer, went in and decided, wow, this material is really good. Let's make a business and sell this to people for use in their everyday lives. So if you go onto Amazon right now, you can buy one of these Mylar blankets. You can get a set of them, and people often use them to keep warm. And they're also used in a lot of humanitarian aid situations as well. So one example here is when people run a race, a marathon or some other race, they're given these blankets to keep warm. And the other example I really like is here. This is a situation where we had a bunch of refugees and they were all given these blankets. They were in difficult situations and not in the best of health, and they were able to use these blankets, which are Mylar, derived from space technology, to keep themselves warm. And this is a nice example of taking technology that was developed for outer space and bringing it back to help humanity. So this Mylar, I think, is a very good example of this. So why should you be interested in outer space? Many of us like space. We love the planets, galaxies, stars. My favorite planet is Jupiter. We all have something favorite in the sky. But there are more practical reasons also that help not just us with our imaginations, but there are examples where other people can be helped as well, just a general population. When you're in outer space, you are in microgravity. Basically, you see images of astronauts floating around up there. There are unique pharmaceutical and manufacturing opportunities in that microgravity environment. Molecules, protein crystals all behave in different ways. Bacteria grows differently. So not only can you take microgravity for pharmaceutical and manufacturing options, you can look down at large swaths of Earth for monitoring temperature, air temperature, water, looking at natural disasters. And these days we're sort of coming to the end of the COVID era. Hopefully we'll be there in the next year or so. You can use large scale data for food security and supply chains. There are abundant resources out there and asteroids, and this is one of my most fun topics. I like to think about asteroid mining. Now, asteroids are made of the same material as our Earth, but they are up there in space and the material has not geologically formed and processed and mixed, so it's relatively easy to get. So you know that we already have rovers going to Mars. They already know how to dig around. We already have spacecraft flying to asteroids and bringing samples back. The Chinese just did this earlier this year. So we know how to dig in space. We know how to bring stuff back from space. Somebody has to put that together, and then we can start mining for valuable material off planet in outer space. And the reason that that's really good to do is mining is an environmentally very toxic procedure. All kinds of chemicals are used to extract the material from the rock. And that typically contaminates groundwater, and residents who live near the mines have their water source poisoned, and the environmental impact on plants and wildlife in the area can be quite significant as well. So if we can take that particular need and move it to outer space rather than doing all this kind of mining processing on Earth, I think that would be really good. So specifically talking about working in outer space on the International Space Station. We look at microgravity effects. We have had students send experiments to the space station, and this was pre-pandemic. We're trying to pick that up again. You can look at heat transport, materials transport between interfaces, and radiation temperature extremes in a vacuum of space. And you can look at material and agriculture in space as well. So this particular link here, I can put this into the chat later, or if somebody wants to take a screenshot of this, please do so. This is a very interesting set of workshops that they've had where I think you might be able to get some interesting information if you want to. All right, so we mentioned COVID, we mentioned the pandemic. You guys know that this is a very unique time in history. My generation is leaving you guys with a mess. That's unfortunate, but it's true. We have not just this health disaster with COVID, we are leaving a climate drastically different, a climate disaster basically for you as well. So, I wish we could change this, but unfortunately, the responsibility for changing your world, cleaning up our mess will fall on you. And this is actually a time when we can think about new opportunities and think outside the box, look away from traditional solutions to come up with new solutions. And this is where young people come in because your minds are much more vibrant and you think in a much more non-linear way. I, as a middle-aged woman, have a very linear, structured way of thinking. You guys think outside the box, you think differently. And, if we bring on talent from the entire planet, we have diversity and global talent, I think we're going to make a big difference in terms of just, heading off the way that climate change, for example, is going. So, new space for space-based solutions for planet Earth. Satellites look down at the Earth and take images of every point on the Earth every day now. It used to be you might look at some swath every few days, but now every point on the Earth gets imaged every day. So there are some really interesting things that have come up. We can use those images of the Earth to look at food security. So you can look at crops and see when the crops will be ready. And this is particularly important for subsistence farmers who own small plots of land. They have to rent a truck to get their goods to market. And as it turns out, 40% of crops spoil before they get to market because it's very hard to time when will my crops be ready. And especially with climate change, farmers cannot rely on the advice of their ancestors. If your ancestors always harvested a certain crop at a certain month of the year, that, all bets are off. With climate change, we just don't have any clear models of what's going to happen when. It's year to year. So you get images from satellites and you look at the spectra that is looking at the different kinds of wavelengths of light in the image, then you will be able to determine when a crop might be ready. Other areas are climate challenge. I showed you the picture of the hurricane before. Here are some fires that are starting in Indonesia. And in terms of urban development, you can look at data from space and try to understand where actual owners are in terms of their boundaries and where development is going on. And then the other thing here, space-based internet. This is important because earlier we were talking, remember, about having connectivity through satellites with your mobile phone. That's only for location right now. That's only for geolocation. Those satellites do not provide access to internet. But what's happening now is SpaceX and Elon Musk and some other companies as well are launching clusters of satellites to be able to provide internet access. That's actual internet access throughout the entire planet. Here you see an example of Northern Africa, the desert. So anybody who lives in these areas that previously have not had access at all to any sort of even cellular technology, they will have access to the internet through this cluster of satellites. There are tens of thousands of these satellites that will be launched in the next few years. So we were talking about NewSpace, right? NewSpace is the commercial space sector. We're talking about all the wonderful things that you can do on that side. Let me step back for a minute and talk to you about big space. Big space is the sector that I like to think of as costing billions of dollars. And the best example of that, of course, is NASA. And I worked on a couple projects. My favorites on NASA were the Hubble Space Telescope. That was my first job out of university. And then I also did my PhD with the Galileo spacecraft, which orbited Jupiter. So this picture here was taken 6 weeks before the Hubble Space Telescope launched in 1990. This is well before many of you were born. I'm sure that your parents were quite young at the time as well. Here I am, right here, one of the few non-white faces and one of the few women on the technical side. Now that's changed quite a bit since 1990. We now have a lot more people of different backgrounds, different genders working in the sector, and that's only making things better and better. So this guy here that you see in the light colored jacket, his name is Dr. Riccardo Giacconi, and he went on to win the Nobel Prize a few years after he was our director in this location. So let me quickly just tell you a little bit more about myself. I have a Bachelor of Science in Mechanical Engineering and a BA in Physics, and a Master's and PhD in Space Physics. And a lot of students ask me, is this kind of a background necessary to join the space sector? And I will say it used to be that you had to have this kind of background. My career I've been in for more than 30 years. Back when I started, you did have to have a STEM degree. You did have to have an advanced degree, more likely would help you. But these days it's different. Because we're not talking about commercial space, we need people with law degrees, marketing, business, communications. Everybody has to come on board and help us grow our businesses. So if it's all just space nerds like me, the businesses won't do well because space nerds are not good at business or marketing. We need lots of different people. So I have been working at NASA and in the commercial space sector for 32 years on spacecraft calibration, mission planning, and I do a lot of public speaking and work as a media consultant. So here you can see I was live commentating the Chandrayaan-2 mission for the BBC a couple years ago. And if you'll recall, that mission did not come to completion. As a lander was coming into the moon, it crash landed. And I have to say, that was probably the most difficult live commentating I have ever done. Because I could see in the ISRO control room, because I was sharing, there was the British commentator with the posh accent speaking to me, asking what's going on. I could see on the screen from NDTV that somebody was whispering and looking very serious, whispering into PM Modi's ear, saying something. And you could just tell that something had happened. And when you looked at the launch profile, you could see that there had been some kind of a drastic change at the altitude. And so that's a very difficult time because you can't say what's happened until they officially say it. And if the public is asking, the reporter's asking what's happening, it was kind of a challenge. So anyway, I've done that. I've done some TEDx talks, and just recently I did live commentating for the Blue Origin mission, and that we mentioned earlier, that was a different Blue Origin mission, as well as for Virgin Galactic. So how did we get here? How did we get so quickly to the era of having all these companies? So if you had spacecraft that were billions of dollars a few decades ago, and now you get spacecraft that are like a few $100,000, that's a big drop in price. How do you get to that kind of a price point so quickly? Here's an example. This computer that you see here, in the 1990s, this was something known as a Sun Spark station that I worked on. It was about $55,000 in today's money. And these things were so expensive and so difficult to come by that only certain people were allowed to use them. We even had a combination lock on a door, and only special people had access to these. So then after that, we started having miniaturization of technology. And if you look at this was a mobile phone back in the 1990s. In the early 90s and in the 80s, this brick, this was large. This thing was considered a mobile phone. Now here's a mobile phone today. Depending on the kind of phone you get and who your manufacturer is, you can get this for just a few $100, right? And the difference between this one and this is the mobile phone in comparison to the big computer. The phone is 150 times faster, and that number will only increase in the next few years. It has 200 times more memory and is 100 times lighter. And again, those values will also start to increase in the coming years in terms of increasing capacity. So what that's actually meant is we've been able to apply this miniaturization of electronics to satellites. So this, what I held in my hand, is a mock-up. It's our handheld CubeSat that we use as a learning tool. So it's not an actual satellite, but it contains some of the components that you might have on a spacecraft itself, and it's good just as a simulation, as a learning tool. So let's think about disruptive innovation. People talk about all these changes that happen and all the resistance to change, and this is not unique to our time. If you look at the transportation industry. For almost all of human history, we used horses and carriages. We used animals for transportation, right? And when you had animals being transported, there were entire industries built around caring for the animals, feeding the animals, building the carriages. There were many, many people employed. And this was just the way it was for thousands of years. If you wanted to go a good distance, you relied on transportation by animals. And then what happened? Then the automobile was invented. This is a Model T, one of the first automobiles. Now, when these were first invented, they were not reliable. They were smoky, and the engines would backfire, and actually they would frighten horses. And it's kind of funny to imagine. I'm sure it was a very serious thing. The horses would hear the loud noise of the engine and get scared. And even if they were carrying passengers, they would just run off. They would go off the road and just start running. And it was a serious, serious safety issue. So were people initially very excited to change from horses to this unreliable technology, the automobile? They were not. They were very resistant. But today we are in a very different realm. This is a Tesla, my favorite car. We are now in a realm where if I were to offer you a ride in a Tesla versus a ride in a horse and carriage to go somewhere, let's just say you want to travel to, just 2 hours away by car, how long would that take you to actually do with a horse and carriage? That would take you a couple days, right? Nobody today would want to replace an automobile with a horse and carriage to rely on a regular basis for their transportation. So because we've now evolved in terms of electric cars, we also have SpaceX doing the Falcon 9 rocket, which actually carries student experiments for us to the International Space Station. So this is a thing that even students can do these days. And, as we're talking about new jobs and sectors, India is coming up to speed very quickly and will soon take the lead globally in terms of all kinds of space-related technology and innovation. So I'm sure that many of you already are aware of the Indian National Space Agency. Here's the website, isro.gov.in. You can go there and look at upcoming activities, and you should just go in and Google upcoming spacecraft and projects for the Indian government space agency. So I'd like to put this up because Mars, we've already sent a spacecraft to Mars. But have we landed on Mars? The answer is no, but the answer is we will soon. So this is just an idea to give you an inspiration that perhaps India will be the first country to set foot on Mars. So the Indians may be the first astronauts on Mars. We'll have to see how that goes. But more specifically today, we have a number of different activities going on. In the next, say, 18 months or so, there's going to be something called RISAT-1A, which is a radar imaging satellite that will be going up. There will be Gaganyaan, which is the first large rocket that will be able to carry humans to the moon. And Chandrayaan-3 is going to be a lunar mission. Now, the exact dates on when these will be ready is still not quite firmed up because of the pandemic and the inability for people to come into work at some times. But let me give you a little bit of information on this particular spacecraft here. All right, I'm trying to get you a video. Will that work? How do I get this to stop share? Hold on a second. All right, give me 1 second here. I'm going to start playing this. And then once it comes up, I'll go back and get you the screen.
I think we're not getting the sound. Is that correct, Arjun?
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, let me fix that.
Right.
That is my bad.
Yeah. You can
Okay.
just, yeah.
All right. I'll just continue. You've been reading, so thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, it's working now. Great.
Cool. Okay, let's go back here then. So then you see there are three different kinds of missions we're talking about. They have three very different functions. So the RISAT missions do something very important in that they look down at the Earth and take images in a particular wavelength. Now, when you have cameras and you take images of the Earth, you have to be in daylight and there has to be no cloud cover. The wonderful thing with synthetic aperture radar is that you can actually penetrate through the clouds as well as take images without sunlight, so on the dark side of the Earth. So this is a new kind of imaging that can give you all kinds of insights into moisture in the soil, in terms of land and water conditions. So this is a very important satellite. And I think you may have noticed it's the sixth of a number of these kinds of satellites that ISRO has launched. And the launch date is still unclear because I think with the pandemic, everything's been shifted, but you should expect this to happen in the coming year or so, I am guessing. So, and then the other two, of course, are lunar exploration and Mars exploration. Let me just take a step here then and go into the concept of startups. So there's a nice website called newspacehub.co, where you can look up the number of startups that are around today. And this is sort of a peer group, people self-reporting. And what you can see is there are a large number of these in India, in Europe, and also in North America, in the US. These seem to be the real hotspots for space startups. So that includes you guys. The number of areas where people work are everything from additive manufacturing, that is 3D printing in space, to the entertainment industry. There are companies that will light fireworks, they're saying, over your part of the Earth from a satellite at some point. Launch, which is rockets, propulsion, robotics, tourism, weather. There are many, many areas in which people are thinking about building technology and services for space. So if you think about where space will be in 2040, it's now, it's 2021, almost 2022. That's in 18 years. In 18 years, some of you will be really old. You'll be in your 30s or your 40s, right? You'll be like the age of your parents. That's very old. But by that time, you will also be very busy professionally. You'll be at the peak of your careers. And the global space economy at that point is supposed to be worth $3 trillion. That's just a number with many, many zeros. It's hard for me to imagine how big that is. And there is a link down here if you want to actually go and look that up. But where is the workforce? Who will take those jobs? Let's think about what will be required to take those jobs. And remember, I said earlier that the space economy needs more than space nerds like me. It needs people with all interests and all backgrounds. So whether you're in business or marketing, you can do sector growth and customer acquisition. If you're interested in media and communications, that's very important for a company because you can help to explain the technology to the average person, to your average citizen. Legal property rights, that's going to be a big thing. We don't know who owns asteroids. If I go and I mine an asteroid, can you fly to the other side and mine the asteroid as well? What's going to stop us? How do we form these agreements? This is something that lawyers are going to have to figure out for us. Finance, of course, for startups, finance is very important. So that's a cornerstone service that we need. Now, if you think more about the science and social sciences side, if you do medicine or biological services, we need you to do pharmaceuticals, and we mentioned space tourism already. Social services where you can apply space technology for the greater good. Now, this is, remember the example of Mylar that I gave you? That was a space technology that was applied to help refugees. So that's one example already of how we do this. And the more inventions we have for space, the more opportunity there will be for applications for social good for each of these new inventions as well. So we talk about engineering and science, not space related. There are new applications and tech transfer. And of course, if you are an engineer or scientist in the space field, you can just continue to work and push boundaries as a professional space worker. So what our company actually does is we specialize in the democratization of space technology and services because the global ecosystem requires diverse skills to continue development. Now we do hands-on training with CubeSats, astropreneurship, and International Space Station research. And we work with professionals and university students of all disciplines. We also are starting to look at working with students of all ages because I think you have to tap this from the very beginning. So how much does it cost to build and launch a handheld CubeSat? 300,000, 1.5 million, or 3 million. I'm going to just tell you, it is not 3 million. It is not 1.5. It is 300,000. Now the labor is extra on top of this, but if you were to, this is 300,000 is about as much as a Ferrari costs, a really fancy sports car. So I don't have that much money. You don't have that much money, but this is a very different price tag than before when you had billions of dollars. So that the cost has shrunk significantly. So, you know, there are various options to join. You can either go and Google these days, or you can get a degree, but, you know, that's really, those are both extremes. And so people who are interested often look to a more structured learning program. And this is one of our International Space Station projects where an astronaut was taking a picture out of the space station window. And this is a SpaceX Dragon flying back here to Earth with one of our student payloads on it. So we've sent 8 labs up to the International Space Station since 2017, and students work in a number of areas. So let's see here. We also have these courses online where you can go in and you can simulate building a CubeSat and a 3D image. We've done these courses. This happens to be in Australia, and we did these courses. Hang on a second. No, I'll just keep going. I'm going to pause this. Too much of a good thing. Okay, so let me go back here. So this is a student working on one of those International Space Station projects. You see she's got this cube here. That's this kit, and you are, as students are given a kit and they can develop their own experiment. In this case, this was fluid transport. You see the bag with the fluids. They studied magnetic fluids, tooth decay, and plant growth over the years. And so what you do is you build your experiment and we help you deliver it to an integrator who then sends it up to astronauts on the space station to turn it on for you in microgravity. They send you back data a couple times a week. And then at the end, you get the unit back yourself as well. So we do these online courses, as I said, then we did the one on astropreneurship in August. We have the next course coming up November 13th and 14th, where we will be looking at image processing using machine learning from NASA harvest data. And so you build your own simulated spacecraft and you actually can watch it turn in 3D once you've selected the components. In the course, of course, we explain to you, what is an onboard computer, what is power storage, and give you a general sense of the system. And then you go and you do a 3D simulation. And once you're done with that, you can actually go and take a picture. And your interface, this is a user interface that you'll have on your screen, directly connects with one of the CubeSat mock-ups in our office. And you can take a picture with the camera on this particular CubeSat, and you can see that's what this guy did here. This screen is his screen here, and he was able to take images. This guy was in Singapore, and I had my office in California, and through the internet, he connected to the hardware in my office and was able to operate the hardware remotely. So if you are interested in this course, astrohub.co/webinars, we do need people who have some sense of programming to join for this. So I would say if you are good at programming and your age is say 15 or older, you might be 14, 15 or older, you might be able to join. I don't want you to sign up and then feel like it's above your head and a waste of your time. But this one will actually be looking at NASA Landsat 8 data, and we'll be doing some machine learning. So I would suggest, consider webinars if you think that those are right for you. Also look at what ISRO is doing. Look at spacenews.com if you're interested in the commercial space sector. And then, of course, follow the big ones like SpaceX and Blue Origin and Virgin Galactic. They've always got some good stuff going on. What happened there? Hold on. I'm trying to go back over. All right, let me get to the next screen. Okay, here we go. So the takeaways for this lecture are, I would say, space technology and services help the citizens of planet Earth. And I hope that you believe access to outer space is becoming democratized globally. The global space economy will develop exponentially, and rocket science is not mysterious and it's not inaccessible. And the most important thing I would like you to walk away from today is I want you to, throughout the rest of the day, talk to your family, talk to your friends, and think about what your role could be in the space sector, because we do have space for everybody in this sector. So with that, I'll just put up our page here that has some of our social media links and some of our contact information. And I'll just leave that up there if anybody wants to take a screenshot. And then I will stop sharing, and I guess we can take some questions. So let me just stop with this. Come back over here. So I've stopped sharing, is that right? You guys see me again?
Yeah, we can see you, not your screen right now.
Okay, great, perfect. So I'll let you just pass on the questions to me as you're ready, and I'm happy to take them.
So a few of them say, where can I get the kit? If you want to talk more about that overall.
Yeah, so the kit is available through our company, and it requires a university or high school student group to have a mentor. So there's a faculty member who has to be trained, who travels to San Jose, California, to Silicon Valley, and receives training. And then the students in the group will be trained by the teacher, and it's a 9-month product cycle. So students very quickly come up with an experiment idea, and then they go ahead and build it and they launch it. The school does have to have the means to pay for this. It is a bit expensive, but if any of you are interested in doing this, we've had a number of schools that do this. And the students from the schools usually end up going to very prestigious universities because they can say, I've actually worked on space technology.
Yeah, these opportunities sound really exciting. So, we'll try to get some more information and the links and everything from you, so we can further share it with these students, because you've now triggered their interest. So
good. That was the idea. Good.
Right. So yeah, there's a question that Arjun has pointed out that I often get, which is, did you have US citizenship to join NASA, and do you have to have one to join NASA?
NASA requires you to be a legal resident or have US citizenship, yes. And my parents left India at partition. And so I was born in the UK, and then we moved to the US when I was young. You can see I don't have a British accent. I have an American accent because I was raised in the US. But yeah, you have to have US citizenship or be a legal resident with a green card to work for NASA. But may I just say, NASA is not the only game in town anymore. This is the whole point of the commercial space sector. They're doing things building upon what NASA did. So lots of opportunity out there. NASA's only, a few tens of thousands of people, not that many. So consider commercial as well.
Right. And now we have, just to bring in my own point of view discussion with you, now in India also, we have many private organizations working with ISRO.
Yes.
So, so there are those opportunities too that are opening up for students here.
Yeah, there are a number of companies, Agnico, Pixel, doing some very good stuff. You can go look those companies up too. And, they're happening. Those are young people, very dynamic. I have a lot of excitement about them, and I look forward to seeing what they're going to do. Definitely.
Right. So yeah, here's a question on a different point of view, different topic, which is a question from Sanvi. Which planet is most suitable for life after Earth?
Current bets are on Mars because we know that there is a water source there. I mean, I think most people would agree that Mars is the one that we could most likely survive on. And that's why there's a lot of emphasis on human exploration of Mars right now.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so let's look at a few more. Yeah. So another question that a lot of kids want to know about, and Arjun has just given that. I want to be an astronomer. What all courses should I do? And Bidushi, that is one problem in India, because they don't have much awareness in the schools and universities about how to go on to that career track. So, right. So we can talk a little bit about that.
And, this is a thing that is, astronomy is always very inspiring. And, everybody, when they look at the sky, this is all of human history, you've been inspired by the sky. If you specifically want to do astronomy, I would suggest studying science or engineering at the undergrad level. So you need to be pretty comfortable with maths and with science in general. And then if you want to study the stars specifically, you'll have to go into an MA master's or a PhD program. And you may end up having to do that overseas if these courses are not there in India yet. But I think one of the things that STEM&Space is trying to do really is to bring that knowledge to young people at an earlier stage of their education to hopefully get that interest in the knowledge base broadened, right?
Yeah, so that's where we are also, we are guiding them at different ages. They're starting with us from very young ages. And even today, there are some students from class 4 and 5, and you may not understand all that she said, but you'll have a good start on where you can get into next. Okay,
Indeed.
So yeah. So somebody says on the same thread, what should we study if we want to get into ISRO or NASA? I think you just did say that in brief.
Yeah, I'm sorry, ask again, what was the question?
What should we study if we want to get into ISRO or NASA?
Okay, so what you study for ISRO and NASA is one smaller area, which is science and engineering. But if you want to work on the commercial side, which I think is growing much more quickly, which is what we've been talking about, then it's not just science and engineering. For that, you want to work in the space sector, there are no jobs with NASA or ISRO, then you go work on the commercial side with a company like Agnikul or Pixel.
Right.
Then you need everything from science and engineering, also law, math, so marketing, business, all kinds of things beyond the traditional STEM fields is what you would need on the commercial side.
So a lot of people are asking you the question, ma'am, have you gone into space? And that's where, what you said in the beginning about private citizens starting to go now,
yeah.
That's a relevant point, yeah.
I have not gotten into space, but I have promised my husband that for our 50th wedding anniversary, we will go to space. So we just had 30 years of marriage. We have 20 years. So in 20 years, the price I think will drop, and it'll probably cost as much as a first class airplane ticket. Only 600 people have been to space so far today. But that number will go up very quickly in the coming years. And you're asking me if I've gone to space. I will say by the time it's the year 2040, maybe you'll already have gone to space yourself, because for the younger generation, space will be much more accessible and much more of a reality.
And in the same topic, there's a question, how long do astronauts have to train before going to space? And they have in brackets, keeping space tourism in mind. And that's a very good point, because space tourism have to train at a different level than astronauts were in the astronaut program. So maybe you can give a couple of lines about that.
That's a very good point. Yeah, astronauts have to train for years. They go through multiple levels of screening, and then the training program to prepare them is at least 2 years. And then they have to continue to train to stay in the queue until their name comes up. But space tourists who go up, pay a ticket to go fly around, they don't have 2 years. They have jobs. They have other things they're doing. This is a tourism, a vacation for them, really. So the training for them tends to be, I'm going to say it off the top of my head right now, that maybe it's a month to 2 months, because realistically, you wouldn't do more than that. And remember, astronauts go to space. That's their job. They run experiments. They do engineering work. They do science work. A space tourist who goes up just floats around and has fun. They don't have a job up there, so they don't need to have the technical, detailed skills. They just need to know basically how to manage themselves when they're in space.
Oh yeah, and I was also very excited about Captain Kirk going boldly to space.
Yes,
but that's great that well-known personalities like that are getting a chance to go and explore and go to space. And
yep.
I think recently Russia sent a movie crew also to film in the ISS
they
directly.
Did, yeah. There was actually a space movie being filmed in space, I think. That was pretty
Right.
cool.
Right. So, so somebody asked, I read Sunita Williams' biography, and I read she conducted many experiments sent by students from Earth to space. Can you comment on that? And also, can you go to space for a very expensive experience? Is it true? Yeah. So these are two separate questions, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So how about the second question first? Can you go to space for a very expensive experience? Yes, that's what Blue Origin's doing. That's what Virgin Galactic is doing. If you are super, super wealthy, sure, you can do that. And even though there's a waiting list, yes, you can do that. Regarding Sunita Williams, yes, the experiments that she runs for students that when she's gone up are basically, they are the same experiments that we've done. I'm trying to remember if she has been one of the astronauts on board when we've sent experiments up there. We've sent up 8 of them so far. But yes, students do build experiments and they do get sent to space. So if you want to do that, what you want to do is get a faculty advisor and have them work with you, and then they get trained, and then you work with them and get trained to do it. Now, since everybody is asking about this, I'm going to pull up a slide that I have elsewhere. So go ahead and ask me the second question. I'm going to be pulling up another presentation because I think there seems to be some interest in this.
Yeah, the second, you talked about the Sunita Williams, and I think we already talked about space, going to space for an expensive experience, and that's what you just said, that the tourism industry has just started and it's very expensive right now. Hopefully it'll go down in time. Yes.
Yep.
So student experiences you're going to talk about, but is there a way such students can be involved or even find out more about student experiments in space?
Okay, let me share my screen. This is a presentation that I gave to a group in Kenya in Africa last week for World Space Week, so that was 2 weeks ago. Let me pop over here to my Zoom. Where is it? Too many windows. Okay, there you are. Let me share my screen again. Okay, and then I will bring this up here. So now you should see you saw this image earlier, right? The International Space Station with the SpaceX Dragon capsule. So this is it's the SpaceX capsule bringing our student experiments back from space. Let me give you a quick overview of that. So you get a space kit. It's a 5 by 5 by 12 centimeter box. This is the size of the box here. It has a camera and a processor in it that you program. And inside it looks something like this. You can see the camera, and then you've got some kind of material in here. As I said earlier, this is a fluid pouch that can be used to put any kind of a payload in. So there's a team of students, typically around 10. We also have another set of experiments in the biological sciences, which I don't have the slides right now, but we can talk about that. Maybe Dr. Mitra, you and I can discuss that later if you'd like.
Right.
But so the teachers go to get trained in San Jose, come back. You start to build this in August. You have to deliver it in January. Astronauts take it up for you between March and May. What I really like about this is the students who build it get to watch the launch. It's not something that takes years and years and you've already, gone and started doing different things, you've graduated. So that's the cool thing. So here are the examples of what some of our students have done in the past year. So starting in 2017, students sent up a genetically modified bacteria to space to look at the effects of radiation on melanin. They've looked at magnetic fluids. They've done some industrial processes with electroplating. And these are all students ages 15 through 22. Tooth decay, this one was fun. Somebody's younger brother lost 2 teeth at once. They kept 1 tooth on the ground as control, sent the other tooth to outer space. The reason you do this is bacteria grows very differently in space. And the astronauts are on the space station and they're in a closed system. So how they are affected by bacteria is something we need to understand. They've also looked at protein crystallization, plant growth, and then gut bacteria. And they like to look at gut bacteria fairly regularly. So that's been done again.
Yeah, these sound very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, one of the things here that I also want to tell you is our students go and do, they get into very prestigious universities. We've had them get into all kinds of prestigious universities around the world because they can say, my application is different. I have actually worked on space technology myself.
Right.
And so it's a pretty cool opportunity. So we have two different kinds of projects. One is this particular one, which involves smaller groups of, say, 10 students. And then there are other groups that do more biological experiments on the order of 20 students, up to even 30 for that one. And that one is a little bit less expensive. But then again, let's discuss that later, and perhaps we can come up with details for you then.
Yeah, that's great. Yes, we'll talk to you, and hopefully we can take some of these at least links and possibilities ahead to the students who are interested. Okay, so just a couple more questions. Is computer programming and computer engineering needed to work in the space industry?
It helps. I mean, it depends. If you're only building hardware, then you don't need it. If you're only building rockets, but if you're doing anything on the software side, it's definitely good to know programming.
Right.
I would say I'll say for myself, I'll tell you, when I started working on the Hubble Space Telescope, I applied for the job. This was a long time ago. Computers were very new, and not all students took courses in computer science back then. If you were a physics major or studying engineering, you didn't always have a computer class. It was, some schools offered it, some schools were still not offering it. I was lucky, I studied computers. So I actually had programming experience, and that's what allowed me to take the job over other people who did not. So I'd say, yeah, right now it is a cornerstone on the software side. On the hardware side, I would say it probably doesn't hurt either. Yeah.
Let's see if there are any more, or we'll slowly start to close this session. How many satellites launched till now in India? I'm not sure you know that, and I'm not sure you would know that exactly, but also some kids have asked about when Chandrayaan 3 and Gaganyaan will launch. Arjun,
So,
do you know the dates? Maybe
yeah,
you can also chip in.
maybe Arjun would know.
Yes. Yeah. So basically, Chandrayaan 3 would be launching in the first half of 2022. That is next year. And as per the Gaganyaan, it will have 3 missions planned. First will be the without the humans, it will be just a test flight mission. After that, they will basically it will be a progressive mission. And by 2024, I believe they will be sending our first astronauts to space, 23 or 24. So the dates they haven't released yet, but yeah, it is going to be pretty soon in the next 1 to 2 years.
So yeah, I'll just ask you a last question. Is there any project you've taken part in that would have been better with modern technology?
Yeah, that's a very good question. That is, thank you for asking. The best example of that is the Hubble Space Telescope. Now, just to give you some history, the space shuttle used to take spacecraft to orbit, and the Hubble Space Telescope was supposed to be headed to space in 1986. And this was a big, expensive project, and they started designing and building it, a decade earlier. And already at that point, the computers were very old and very slow and out of date. So scheduled launch in 1986, as I said, and then we had a big disaster, a tragedy. The space shuttle Challenger blew up. It had 7 astronauts on board, including a school teacher. And so the entire program was stopped. And there were no launches. So the Hubble was returned to the clean room, and they held off on launching it till 1990. So when I started working on the Hubble, what I was doing was looking at ground systems data. It was in the clean room. They would turn on the instruments, take some test data, and send us the results for analysis to see what was working and what was not. And one of my jobs was to keep track of the dead diodes within the spectrograph. So there are components within the spectrograph that actually just stopped working because the thing had been sitting on the ground for so long. So when we sent it up to space, it had very little memory, and it was already very old, plus the extra delays made it even older. And so this is one of the things that happens with government missions, the money for government, ISRO, NASA, that comes from the citizens, right? So it's not their money, it's the taxpayer, your parents paying their salaries, their taxes to be able to do this. So the government has a huge responsibility and works very slowly and very conservatively. They have huge successes, but they work slowly. On the other side, if you're on the commercial side, you don't have to build big, you can build small, and you can take more chances, because if a CubeSat doesn't work, you lose $300,000. If the Hubble Space Telescope doesn't work, you lose billions of dollars. So the stakes are a little different, and that's why, you know, the commercial side has a little bit more opportunity to be flexible. So yeah, to answer your question, I wish the Hubble had had more modern computers on it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think with that, we thank you so much, Dr. Bhattacharya, for coming with us here today and talking to the students about how they can get into space experiments and experience with space technology, and of course, later in the future, get into careers in this track. So I think a lot of them have been very excited to hear about some of the projects you mentioned that they can take part in, such as the CubeSat or space experiments. So we will talk to you and talk to them about that. And hopefully with you, we can also take forward some of the virtual telescope projects to these students. So thank you again.
That would be good. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming on your Saturday morning and joining us. I appreciate it, everybody. Yeah, take care.
Okay.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us.
Bye. Thank you, students, for joining us, and let's celebrate